Uh, Great. So let's start this out. My name is Fatia Rahma to be precise. I'm a community manager from Code Control and 9am.works. Code Control and like a little bit about Code Control and 9am. It's a startup from Berlin. We bridge freelancer and businesses. And what we do is, as a community manager, I manage a pool of around 700 selected freelancer. All of it are in the tech industry, so developers, UI, UX designer, project manager, product owner, and all that kind of stuff. And why I'm doing this series, this is my third edition. Actually, the first speaker is here, Sebastian Arbogas. I'm sorry for putting you on the spotlight, but he was my first speaker. So I'm really honored to have you back here. But yeah, the reason why I have this Cryptalk session is because it is an interesting topic to talk about, especially the one that we will talk about today, about the gender gap and women empowerment topic in general. And after that, and like the second reason is because people are also interested in it, especially from the community, because most of the time I try to create something to cater to the needs of the community. And the second company that I mentioned is 9am.works. It's actually a new product that we just created in February. We just launched in February. What it is, it's a job board website, also like a freelance management system. And we provide information about freelancing jobs. And we also provide freelancing management system in a sense that if you find a new client and then you want them to pick your schedule, you can do it easily in 9am. We also have 9am smart profile, which means that if you sign up with us, you will get a new profile just from your data. You just have to sit back, relax, and we'll provide you with the most optimum profiles ever. But that's about me. So let's just, because like we want to try to cut it short, do we? But introduction. So today we have two speakers, and to engage in this discussion from Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. I'm remembering it. I'm not reading anything right now. So sorry if I got it wrong. And they're also from the LT program. And it's Sarah Palurovic and Kiana Weiss, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I'm happy to start off this round. My name is Sarah Palurovic. As Fatia already introduced myself, I am currently an executive director at the Digital Euro Association in First Priority. That's kind of the more needy baby of the two, I would say. And then I'm also a research associate at the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. That's how it all started, and also the capacity with which I'm currently joining this panel right now. And let me just talk a little bit about the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center to give you an idea of what it does. So essentially, the first thing we always say, and we're supposed to say, is that it's a think tank and a research center, but neither of these really provide clarity on what it is that we're primarily focused on. And of course, as the name suggests, we deal with blockchain technology and the impact that it has on the economy. So in particular, what does that mean in practice, right? It means that we do general research. So we go into the direction of academia. We look at things such as the Bitcoin CO2 footprint, look at how we can offset that, how high would the cost be for institutional investors to both mine and hold Bitcoin, for example. So there'll be one concrete example of the type of academic research that we do. And then we also do things such as prototype development. And I would say our third biggest pillar is certainly organizing events and educational opportunities for students and executives. So there's a bunch of educational programs out there, such as DLT Talents, which Kiana will talk about in just a minute here. Then we also have DeFi Talents and NFT Talents following the same structure, but being steered obviously towards different topic interests and also towards different target groups, which can be important in the crypto space, as you know, as we want to get more women and marginalized groups into the field. And currently we focus on crypto assets and digital securities. So really the hot topics that arise. So anytime the EU releases a new piece of information on what type of wallet they want to ban today, we're of course all over it, and keep the followers up to date with everything that's happening in the EU and also beyond. And the Blockchain Center is also the host of the yearly crypto asset conference in Frankfurt, if you're familiar with that. If not, really great opportunity to meet many people in the blockchain and crypto space. Web3 not as much just yet, but who knows, maybe next year there'll be more people in that space as well. And yeah, now I talked about the Blockchain Center a little bit. Let me just come back to why I'm on this panel in particular. This is well, my way basically into the space was I was interested in blockchain technology first and became feminist second. So that was an interesting development from basically discovering disparity and inequality also in the space, made me more aware of it. And certainly a topic that I'm passionate about from a professional point of view and also from a private point of view. Yeah, my personal experience, of course, also has to do with being invited to panels, conferences, anywhere really, as a woman, and not necessarily in the first place just as Sarah, as a person. So that's a very interesting development that I've definitely seen. Yeah, Kiana, do you want to continue with the DLT talents and maybe tell us as well if you've made the same observation for yourself thus far?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So I will introduce myself first. I am Kiana. I am currently studying at Frankfurt School of Finance and Management in Business Administration and Philosophy. And my occupational background is rather technical, which is kind of a coincidence actually, because back then, and we will hear more about that stereotype kind of in the further discussion, back then I didn't hold the belief that I was able to work in a technical industry because I just saw male role models. So it was rather a coincidence when I started a technical internship at Deutsche Telekom and had a really nice enhancing, though male-dominated team, which gave me the confidence to afterwards also pursue rather technical jobs. So that also led me to my current position at Frankfurt School Blockchain Center with Sarah as my colleague. And actually, she was also helping me a lot getting in there because once again, I didn't learn from my mistake and again held the belief that I wasn't able to be in the blockchain industry. And she really helped me to gain the confidence and became my mentor afterwards. So that's also kind of my motivation why I'm really interested in that field and also talking about it to other women, but also to men, of course, to show them that that is not true and that there are female role models that you can look up to. And in my current position at Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, my main project is the DLT Talents Program, which Fatia also mentioned in the beginning. And that is an 18 weeks long project exclusively for women to educate them in the field of blockchain technology and basically to empower them to become leaders in the sphere. And its didactical focus is based on self-learning. So that way the women prepare assignments for a bi-weekly meeting and they can present their assignments, help each other with questions that came up during their own research. And in that way, women are engaged to individually present their research and also to build a female network in helping each other, which is really good for their future career and also personal path. We educate 200 plus women per year, and many of our alumni were inspired after the program to change their career paths, to found startups or to create a personal brand on, for example, social media. And in general, I would say that the DLT Talents is a program that is very dear to my heart because I am personally convinced that there's nothing stronger than a female network. And also my motivation behind this program and my personal interest in the field is due to my strong sense of fairness. And I think that our current world, which is male driven, is not fair, of course. And that goes from simple things like temperature in office spaces that are accommodated to male temperature, but also goes to more severe topics like medicine, where, for example, heart attacks are not diagnosed for women because they just show differently, which is of course prevents life-saving measures. And that also goes into the blockchain field, which we'll talk about more today. So that really drives me as well. And yes, I would suggest.
Well, thank you, Sarah and Kiana, for the introduction. So as we all know today, we will base the discussion based on the research because they are researcher. And could you tell me more about, could you tell us more maybe about your research? What do you actually do, and what motivated you to do this research?
Yes, sure. So the research is based or in collaboration with the DLT Talents program. And the motivation is, of course, to raise awareness on the gender gap in blockchain technology, but also to show if and how programs like DLT Talents as executive education programs can help to close the gender gap. And for that, we conduct strategic literature review and also expert interviews from companies that engage with the DLT Talents program in order to find out the motivation, limitations, and benefits of sending women to such executive programs.
And as far as my knowledge, this research is still an ongoing one, right? How long have you done this research, and what have you found so far that you can perhaps tell us without spoiling the big surprise later on?
Sure. So the research has been going on for about a month and will continue, as you said. And I don't know, Sarah, if I should go first to show some findings, and you can maybe continue.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. So I would say we start with some definitions. So first of all, we have, of course, gender equality at the core of the research paper, which is defined as unequal allocation of resources amongst females and males. And that is actually a predominant goal of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, specifically the SDG 5 goal. And it mainly comprises ending discrimination against women, eliminating harmful practices, also recognizing unpaid care through the provision of public services and also economic resources. And last but not least, to create equal opportunities in leadership and decision-making in political and also economic environments. And this gender inequality is so severe that it's said to take approximately 267 years to overcome completely, while the SDG 5 goals, as the United Nations stated in 2022, are pushed off further by the COVID-19 pandemic. And from these gender inequalities, we can kind of derive measures, gender gap measures, which are mostly divided into the gender pay gap, the gender pension gap, gender lifetime earnings gap, and also the gender care gap. But I would like to add one, which is the gender data gap, which I think is kind of the underlying reason for all of that, and also goes against the argument of many that say that these measures, these gender gap measures that I just mentioned, come from the fact that females have different preferences than men. And that's why the measures are imprecise maybe, or shouldn't be taken too seriously. However, the gender data gap shows that such data doesn't really exist for females to have like specifically different preferences. And that is because either data of females is not collected at all, or if it is collected, it is mostly sex disaggregated data, meaning that it's like pushed together with male data such that it's not distinguishable anymore. And that must not necessarily be done on purpose, but is probably more an effect of millennia long measures of taking men as the example or as the normal for men and women. Yeah. And
if I may add to some
yeah.
of the points that you just mentioned. Well, as you notice, I mean, doing research in gender inequality can be quite the, I wouldn't say dry topic, but it obviously takes away from anecdotal evidence that we see every day. And this is also our approach for today, because oftentimes the entire gender debate can, of course, be a bit derailed if people just say that's your subjective perception of reality. But I think what this really goes to show, and the many of the things that we're listing here are also based on the book Invisible Women, that explores this gender data gap quite heavily in so many instances that the amount of evidence is just overwhelming. But just to touch on closing the gender gap in economic opportunities and the approximate time it takes, which Kiana just quoted, is approximately going to take over 260 years. Last week, I was actually in Berlin, more on vacation and going to the DDR museum. And one thing I wasn't aware of is basically how women were given different rights depending on where in Berlin they lived in, right? So whether it was the west or the eastern side. And because in the, I hope I'm not confusing these two now, but I think in the western side, they were actually allowed to take birth control, for example, because not because the state was benevolent, but actually because the state needed women in Germany to make money, to earn money, to comply with what was planned by the government, that all people living in Germany had to contribute to the gross national product of that part of Berlin, for example. So what was also different back there, or actually before the wall got removed at one point, is that in different parts of Germany, women still needed permission of their husbands actually to sign a working contract, and then to, if they wanted to stop working again at a certain point, they needed permission by their husbands as well. So they themselves couldn't make the decision of wanting to work and then having the autonomy to say when they wanted to stop working again. And we still see the repercussions of that now that it's 30 to 40 years later. And so this approximation of 260 years to close the economic opportunities gap just tells us so much about how much more than just being given permission to work this inequality issue really raises. This, just touching on one thing. And then one more important thing that we currently face is, of course, whenever there's a crisis. So for example, the COVID-19 crisis, what we see is that the goals set by the United Nations that Kiana just mentioned, so the SDG 5, for example, they are pushed further off track by this fallout that COVID-19 is causing. And we can also relate this back to war times, actually, where we see countries such as Sweden, so the Nordic models, being way different. What I mean by this is that there's laws in place and there's no social stigma to, for example, or not as much of a social stigma for parents, especially males, to take parental leave when they do have kids. And this is still not something that's normalized in other countries. And of course, if we go back to Germany, of course, what I'm referring to this mostly because we're based in it and we're more used to the system here. It might be different around countries and the rest of the world. But we generally see Germany as an industry nation, as Europe's leader and so on. But we can still see the repercussions of not having the privilege of being able to address these questions, because we had to rebuild a country. Then we had, wars going on. And for example, in Sweden, where they didn't have any wars for 200 years, we clearly see that they had the opportunities to think about different things in their community and society, as opposed to how are we going to lead this war, who are we going to support, and rebuilding the country. So just to add that there.
Considering that blockchain industry is quite new industry, I would say, right? Do you think the gender gap that's happening currently is that critical? Or like, can it still, does it still need like 260 years to close it? Or would it be able to be closed like a bit quicker? What do you think about it?
I mean, that would be a bummer if that took 260 years. Bitcoin's price will probably be, I don't know. I'm not gonna take a guess here. My boss told me not to, right? No, but in all seriousness, I think the question needs to be divided in two. So will it take that long to close the gap in the blockchain space? I do not think so, because we have a different awareness nowadays. It is talked about more. It's more and more understood as a problem for both and all genders, not both, but also beyond binary genders, of course. And then the other question is basically, it is, or maybe it's not a question, it's more of a statement. I think it's a problem currently that the crypto space claims to be the most inclusive type of money that we've ever had. And what we currently see is the highest transaction volumes and private equity and VC professionals mostly being male dominated still, and thus meaning that the circulation of crypto is also mostly male created, or coming from male crypto transactions and so on. So the question of, do we really show the world's history of moving money? So is the blockchain data that's recorded, for example, for Bitcoin, really that inclusive? Probably not. It's probably showing a very small portion of the world's overall population moving funds from A to B, and that still being male dominated. So we can't really speak about the level of inclusivity that I think would like to, or we often think we're talking about when we talk about crypto and Bitcoin mostly, I guess.
And before we continue the conversation, I just want to add that this is an interactive discussion event. So if you want to add something to it, if you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand virtually on Zoom, and then I will relay the stage to you, because I think it's important to not have just like a conversation between Sarah and I, as we all just like one community here, at least in this event, for a brief amount of time. And I guess I'm really interested that what do you think is needed from people in the blockchain space to close that gender gap? Because I've seen like there are a lot of like women-based community, like for example like the DLT program, or just like in general, like a woman focused like blockchain community that aims to educate other women, or just like to support, like to promote the blockchain project or from other women, right? Do you think these efforts are in? Well, I guess the answer is no, because we're still here talking about the gender gap. But like, what do you think can be done on top of those?
I would say it has to be noted that the blockchain technology in its most prevalent use cases is based on, first of all, the technology industry and the finance industries. So those are both industries that are highly male dominated, meaning that there are less women who have experiences in that field, or maybe education in that field, which raises the barrier for them to actually start in the blockchain space. So to overcome that, I think that one of the most effective ways is education. Now, to close the gender gap more on a short time horizon, would be probably executive education, because those are the women who are currently in the workforce and who can work right now in blockchain technology. But I think that in closing the gender gap long term, there has to be changes in early childhood education, also like changes in how kids are raised, because there are currently many biases or stereotypes for females and males, especially in the technological field, which actually prevent females from going into the space. I see one hand is raised, so maybe
Sebastian.
before I continue.
Thank you, by the way, Kiana, for the answer. Sebastian, maybe you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just curious because I mean, there's obviously a lot of denial from males when it comes to this kind of issues, and I've heard people argue that since it's a decentralized space, it's not like traditional industries and stuff where there are gatekeepers, but at the same time, it would be foolish to consider that, because there's obviously an influence of the behavior of males on communities where people are like invited to participate. And I'm curious to know what's your experience participating in those communities, I guess in Discord forums and stuff like that. Do you feel a similar kind of bias and yeah, I mean, disrespect, or yeah, do you feel like your contributions are respected and recognized more in crypto spaces and crypto communities, as opposed to like traditional workspaces, or not?
I think there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to attempt to answer your question, but Kiana, feel free to tackle anything I'm not getting to. First of all, thank you for the question, and also, I guess, thank you for taking the time to listen to women speak about the topic, right? Because as you said, it can be a bit uncomfortable, I guess, as well to sit down and deal with it, I guess. So the first thing I want to touch on is that if we say, okay, so you were specifically now asking for the experience of being in a decentralized field where you don't necessarily have an identity that's either male or female. I do know that in the DeFi space, there are, or in the metaverse, of course, you can basically indicate by how your character looks, or by giving information about it, what your gender is. And I have made the experience that I was treated differently. So there were a bunch of, as male indicated, characters walking around, and then you're basically approached. And I mean, I was a dinosaur, and people said, "What a sexy dinosaur." And I mean, they knew nothing about myself except for that I was female. But again, I think that's kind of anecdotal evidence. This was also what you were asking for. But what I think is also more behind that question is, okay, if now I, as a venture capitalist professional, if I need a VC myself, I'm looking for an investor in those terms, then if the investment team is male dominated, which usually it is, that also impacts the deal pipeline, right? So as soon as I'm visible, to some extent, I'm of course faced with, let's say, the normal type of gender inequality that we have in all other spaces to begin with. And what I do think is positive is certainly the NFT space, where right now, of course, there's still a big disparity between the amount of sales of NFTs that are going towards female artists. So to give you an idea, there was a comprehensive study done that showed that only 16% of NFT sales on OpenSea in 2022 were going to female artists. And then actually for anybody with a double bind, so non-white women, it was even worse. And this is obviously an issue. However, what we do see is that creators in the Web3 space now, so if we're moving on from, let's say, crypto or DeFi in general and look at this specific sector, then it is the case that these communities, since they're really community focused, that we can have a certain edge over men, possibly women. That is, so there's projects such as Women Rise or Every Realm or Meta Angels that target that specifically. And when it comes to community growth, you could make the point, I guess, that some women are more inclined to do so, or want to invest more time in building communities, depending on the project, which can be very, very helpful for the success rate. Hope that answers the question. If there's anything to add, Kiana, from your side, or Fatia, feel free to add it.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, as personally for me, in my experience, because I usually don't use my own name, and as I think we all do, right? So I keep it rather like gender neutral, but on the most occasion they would just think that I'm like a male, and I just let them do it, because like I've seen like how they interact with people who represent as like female and a group chat, for example, in Discord, on Telegram, and I just don't want that to happen to me. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, it just doesn't feel yeah, I don't feel like being objectified or like being seen as like something that is not that is an objectification actually. But yeah, it's just the interaction that I've seen between people who represent male and another person who represent as a male is different than the interaction that I've seen from people who represent as male and two people who represent as a female, and I just don't want to experience that. And I'm not sure if that, because like I'm not sure what was the actual reason for doing that, and I don't really quite understand why people can just like treat each other equally, especially in an anonymity, and that Discord and Telegram and basically just the Web3, no, just like blockchain that offers. So yeah, that's why I'm creating this, so we can hear more from both sides and can learn more together. And if anyone has questions or thoughts or any like want to share their experience in building some building projects in the blockchain industry, or like your interaction, because like one of my questions is that well, I already asked if it's enough, like but like what, like as a male, like because like we have several male audiences here, do you see it like differently when there's like a female within the blockchain space? Or like, do you see any difference that people who represent as female experience in the blockchain space that you just noticed? Anyone?
I don't have a specific example. However, as Sebastian mentioned, in blockchain technology, we have theoretically a more inclusive, for example, financial system, where we don't have any barriers to investment or to having a bank account even. However, the community factor, also as Sebastian mentioned, is very big. So it's not the blockchain itself that would then be exclusive, but rather the community, because it is just currently male dominated. But which is, of course, because when you base it on this inclusive technology, is something that you can overcome if you have enough educated, strong women in the beginning of the development of such a technology, before you can call this technology a mass adopting technology. So that's of course an uplifting character of the blockchain technology.
Thank you, Kiana. We have Andreas here, and after that, Giulio, you can go forward with your thoughts.
Hey everyone. So to answer your question in terms of do I see it differently, the one thing that I'd like to understand a little bit better is what can people do to make it more interesting for women to join specific events, etc. Yeah? So last week, for example, we had the first Ethereum meetup in Frankfurt since 2 years. which had about 50 or 60 people attending, of which sadly only 5 women were there. The next day, there was another event hosted with the tagline "Fashion in Web3." And there were, I would say, at least 30 to 40 women present there. And you could argue now that, you know, maybe we should have set up our agenda a little bit differently. Yeah, but that's just like the curious thought that I have in terms of like, there are a lot of opportunities for women to get into the space, and I wouldn't necessarily say that because of the decentralization characteristic it's easier, but there is a lot of, you know, chance for women to grow within the space, depending in which field and in which segment also, because, you know, Bitcoin people think different than Ethereum people, which think different than people that are doing Solana, which are different than Polkadot, which are different than Gnosis, which are different for traditional finance, blockchain, Hyperledger, etc. Yeah, and that's a question I'd like to ask also the panelists. Basically, if the research that you did focuses on specific segments within crypto, blockchain, DeFi, Web3, etc., or if it's a general bird's view. Yeah, but it's definitely seeable that there are a lack of women within the field, yeah, or less women. But I think that's within tech space, sadly, generally.
Thank you. Let's collect this question for later after Julio. So Sarah and Kiana, you can answer more about your, explain more about your research. Julio?
Okay, can I? Yeah, I can, well, bring my direct experience. I basically agree with what Andreas said. So basically, I'm come from hard science, so from STEM, and then in STEM there are less women. Of course, there are less women. This is quite, I mean, obvious. But from my experience, I've seen that it's a matter of preference. I mean, it's like they are less attractive for women. We always receive very few application for PhD. It's like 80-20. It's not like a matter of we select more men or more women, but we do not receive any application from women at all. And for example, in the gender gap, there are I mean, there are maybe more men in this space, but you know, it's like not everyone count as one. So luckily in the academic space we have weight. So maybe in a crowd of 100 people that are 80 men and 20 women, maybe those 20 women are much more skilled than those 80 men. So we have quite a very fair balance between very skilled men and very skilled women. This is what I have seen in this space, because of course we have more men that maybe are interested, but if you count the very skilled people, it's quite balanced between men and women. Also, I have recently published a bibliometric analysis on blockchain oracles, because I'm quite in the blockchain oracle space, and about the experts about blockchain oracles, we have maybe in the list there are more men, but the most cited people are women. The two most cited researchers in the blockchain oracle space are women. So yes, it's just a matter of number, but if you count just a flat number, I think it doesn't give the exact picture of the whole space. You also have to think about which one is very skilled, and just think about very skilled people. If you only look at skilled people, it's very fair, in my opinion. And maybe there are more enthusiastic people which are men, but they don't really count, in my opinion, of course. This was my idea.
All right, so first thing that of course stands out to me. I wasn't aware, but for example, of how many women there were to be quoted in the Oracle topic in academia. So a great thing that you're bringing this up. So this is just another example of what we said. So for example, NFT, the NFT space can be more inclusive or can be less gender unequal as compared to other fields in crypto, or actually, as Andreas also said, as compared to certain crypto projects, which this is a very interesting point that you're raising. This would be very interesting to do as a follow-up, actually, basically examining in how far you can say that some crypto projects or communities are more welcoming or more gender equal welcoming as compared to others. That's not something that I've thought about, but definitely great impulse. I'll definitely look into that. It's very, very interesting. Then coming back to the problem of STEM related subjects and positions in companies not being filled with women, it used to be assumed that biological factors play a role here. However, that was proven to be wrong. That's actually also something that the research is touching on. So it used to be assumed that, for example, testosterone plays a role into why STEM positions are more filled with males. What is said to be true, though, which was also assumed back then, is that socio-cultural differences play more of a role in women's career choices. Now, this is not necessarily saying that's why they're not attending the polka dot event or any other specific crypto event, but certainly has to do with why women don't see themselves in those positions that maybe you, Giulio, are putting out there. Then another big issue with STEM-related positions is also that if women see a lack of role models in the STEM area, then they don't necessarily assume that they can become an executive in that field themselves. There's actually a lot of evidence that and actually also making the case for a gender neutral or gender inclusive language that basically shows that if males are supposed to draw, so again, referring back to German here, but I'm sure other languages have the same problem, where it's said to, you're supposed to draw policemen or women in that case. There's a big difference in what kids actually draw, and males tend to have a more equal more equal drawings in terms of the gender that they draw. However, women don't. They draw men way more frequently, and this is not just one cherry-picked study. This was actually proven many times and confirmed via double-blind studies. So the case of basically saying everybody's included if we publish those open positions can be argued, certainly. Let's say that's basically what I have to say. I'm not sure for how to improve events in a way that makes them more women friendly, because I do believe that it starts much sooner. So in terms of you're only invited to the event when you're already in the space, then why aren't you in the space? Well, maybe because there wasn't really a role model, or you don't really think that this is something you can personally achieve, and the reasons for that can, of course, differ, which is a very diffuse answer. But yeah, I'm not attempting to solve that problem today, I don't think. Kiana, what do you think?
Yes, I would like to add to that women show to have at least the same capabilities in STEM areas. And one attempt to solve the question why there are less women in STEM is that they additionally often have strong verbal skills, which gives them the opportunity to choose maybe from a broader job pool. So maybe they just choose another one, but that again underlies that women don't have any less capabilities in those areas, but rather just don't believe themselves. They are not in the mindset to believe themselves to be fit for this industry, because they feel a lack of similarity, because they're just way more men. And then that also touches on Giulio's point that I also believe that there are at least as many qualified women in the STEM field. However, if you are at a conference as a woman and you see 100 women and 5 females, then of course you will think that they are all equally qualified, because you do not get to know each one of them. And that again makes you think that you as a woman are not in the group of those who are more qualified. So I think it's of course mindset that plays a big role here, which is very interesting and of course hard to overcome, because it's not really measurable, but it's important just to raise awareness.
Yeah, very good point, Sarah, Kiana, and everyone else. And Sebastian also put on the comments that we shouldn't equate participation with interest, because, for example, on the example of the meetup events, the people and the women are maybe more interested in fashion because they assume that more women will be there, so they would feel more heard, whereas if they go to an Ethereum meetup, they would assume that there's gonna be more male, and so they would feel like less heard or less seen. So and that's also very, very, very good point, Sebastian. Maybe Katarina, do you want to add to that?
For Ultima, I was studying Secret Institute in Barcelona. It's a course of blockchain technologies, Master of Blockchain. And we were on beginning 3 women in the course, and on the end 2. And from the 15 people approximately, from our part, of course, which was a business in the blockchain, we were 2 women, and one of us had the best of the final thesis, and so it was she was very successful in the men's group when I tell it, because it's and for me, when we are speaking about women in the blockchain, I think it's also different view of point, which position, because, for example, I'm from the marketing department. And for me, it's a blockchain very interesting, but from the point of view that I described, and I describe the term for the people, for the masses. And it was my decision that I would like to study blockchain. And because for me, is blockchain very exciting, it's very nice. And in this part of blockchain, if these jobs, I see, I think more women than in other areas. And also when I concentrated on NFTs, I think that this is also because it's with art and with photos and images. So I think that in this part, it's also more women than in the other. But for example, coding or the very technical parts of blockchains, I think there is less women. But also when I became to the blockchain, I was afraid, especially the men's era, because this is very technical. And I was really afraid, and every time was really afraid to learn. I thought I'm not able to learn it. But my colleagues told me, you have to. Okay, so I had to know possibility to leave this this era, and time to time, and step by step, I like to more and more blockchain. I think that also, in my experience, I think there is problem that many videos and many description of the blockchain is for prepared for men, by men. And I think that women need another type of description. I think that will be a little another type of speech and another type of eras in blockchain, maybe.
Because like representation matters, so they can also feel more connected by they, I mean women, can also feel connected and not feel as like different. So we're actually getting into the last 7 minutes of the session. If anyone want to have one last thought, one last comment, one last questions? Laura, perfect. Before I conclude the events, that will be really great. There you go, solved everyone. That's the last one. Go
Can you
on.
hear me?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I wanted to raise also the problem of leading positions, really. So in the blockchain community, you see several quantities of men, even in the crypto assets conference, which I assisted. I was shocked that there was mostly men. And I think this is evolving, this is changing. There are more women interested in participating in these events and knowing about Web3, about the different blockchains, Ethereum, Solana, etc. And from my perspective, I found this job. I'm a blockchain researcher, and I do research on digital assets for my company. And to be honest, I feel like I'm heard. I participate actively in every activity of the company. However, I see that there is like no leading roles in blockchain, and I think this is related to risk awareness. I mean, more. I see that men are more like crazy. They just think like I will give this idea a try, and this is like I don't know, this is super volatile, but I don't care, I will do it. And in the case of women, at least the ones I know, they're more risk averse. They're more like, no, I prefer to have a steady job with a steady pay. And I think that the culture really affects the way you see things. And in order to bring more women in the field, we need to change this perspective and seek more risk. Even if it is scary, it's like perhaps having these environments where women can try it out, different ideas, and don't like stop being afraid of losing everything.
So thank you so much for the good points. That's a really nice cherry on top. And I think we can, well, I can conclude that from this past hour that first we learned that there is a difference in women representation, or women, like a gender gap in different sectors of blockchains, right? Whether it's from DeFi, whether it's from the leadership position, from the executive position, from academia, and those are like interested to be further studied, so we can tackle it not as like gender gap in blockchain, but rather like gender gap in blockchain sectors, subtextures, which is really interesting to know about. And I think the second one is that from the experiences that we've heard before, that there are various reasons why there is the gender gap, whether it's historical, economical, whether it's personality, cultural, and the way that we can tackle this, it depends, of course, based on the reason. But I think as a community in ourselves, we can tackle the gender gap by not only by providing this inclusive technology, but also by providing inclusive community in the community, and community as in the organization and in the leadership process. And about leadership process itself, I think Sarah also mentioned it, that one of the reasons we don't see a lot of women on the leadership in the leadership level is because, well, Laura mentioned, because women tend to have like different personality, different risk strategy, and Sarah mentioned about how there is not enough role model. So I'm glad, I guess the bigger takeaway here is that how can we provide more role models for the future women in blockchain? And that will be the question for today and the homework for all of us. Thank you so much for joining Cryptalk session number 3, Women Empowerment and Gender Gap in the Blockchain Industry. It's 2 minutes before the end. I would like to say have a very great evening, and you will all hear from me, or at least see me around, hopefully. And thank you so much for your participation for this amazing discussion. I will upload the video on YouTube tomorrow. You will see it on my page, on my LinkedIn page, or the Code Control page, and I will tag all of you there. Until next time then, thank you.
Thanks for engaging, guys.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much for the discussion.